I will call to order the audit and finance report. We've just got 3 things on here, so it'll be relatively quick. The first one is a debt service overview that I'm not going to go into that now, but David Moore is going to be coming back in either January or February to us to give us a presentation on, just to give you an overall picture of our full amount of debt that the district has, how it's being paid back, you know, from where are the streams of money going to pay it back, and what are our limits on that, because we're up against our limits on that. The second thing, well, let me go to the third thing first, which is the November financial statement. The committee basically led, I should say, by the CFO of Roper, St. Francis. He kept asking essentially, all right, show us our monthly year-to-date so that we can look at what we're spending, not just the formal financial statement that we've been looking at, but doing a better job of saying, all right, what should we be spending in December? What should we be making by this time in December? And then what's the differences? So that, you know, for example, if you backed up 3 years from now, like one of Glenn's first comments was, we went off the rails the year before in November. And if we would have had something like this, we would have known it. So this is, at this point, we're still looking essentially 5 weeks in the rearview mirror, but at least it's not 40 weeks in the rearview mirror. And so, Kelly, if you'll explain this to us,
please. Last board meeting, we did present this changed format, but when we met with the Audit and Finance Committee, we realized that we really do need to be a month in arrears because of all the revenue not being posted in time for the Audit and Finance Committee meeting pretty much the second day of the very next month. Okay. So this was to go back and revisit the November. So that first column shows, this is our budget for each one of these categories, and it was a more simplified version. What we've received year to date, revenue and expenditures, and then these differences. But what the Audit and Finance Committee is mostly interested in, like Todd Garrett just said, if we allocate a monthly expenditure based on previous years' history, the revenue receipts and the expenditures by month, and then look at what we've received and spent this month, we have a deficit in November of $8 million, but that's because revenues, the local revenues aren't collected until December and January of each month. So when you look at your salary, for instance, we already have saved just for the month of November $1.6 million in salaries, and then in the benefits, but we're over by the supplies and the materials. So the net effect of the expenditures is we've come in under budget $500,000 for the expenditures. So the revenues are tricky because they don't come in, the local revenues don't come in monthly like that.
And
so this,
well, I was just going to say, like on the supplies and materials, one thing that's happened in the past is you get to the end of the fiscal year and everybody says, all right, it's June, go spend everything you got left on new whatever you want. So this year they had encouraged spending that up front, which is part of the reason for that $1 million difference. Yeah. And the point of switching to this was to get into a document that we can all look at quickly and use this as rather than the accounting document we were getting before, use this to say, all right, how's the district managing its money? And
would that document be produced every month?
Yes.
Yeah, this is a monthly.
And so, then right now they're doing it by hand.
Are they going to go back and do it as well, like, or just starting from this moment, last month, and then going forward?
Yes, this is our second month now.
Okay.
Yep.
Will we still receive the other monthly reports?
Everybody's elementary school just called them. So
Yeah, she's with me.
Todd, have you asked them to not produce the ones we've been getting, or just to add this document?
I can't remember what
we are producing it for finances benefit, so we can keep a track of it, and we can bring that forward as well. We just decided for finances purposes we needed that document.
I think it'd be a good addition
to have both.
the board. I
okay.
like it. Thank you.
If you just put it in an update now.
Yeah, absolutely.
We can do that.
But this is a lot simpler to read, and if we're doing this, our Kelly's staff is doing this by hand now, and it's very time consuming. If by, let's say, May, June, we decide it's been a worthwhile venture, we look at potentially getting software to do this for us.
Thank you.
Do we want to talk about the 5-year projections, or?
Yes, please.
Okay. So this was a kind of a first blush of the 5-year budget. I think I want to focus on, if you look at the second page where it has all the revenue identified. When Glenn was here, we originally put in a 3.5 mil tax increase. And this is an updated version to remove that 3.5 mils. So the bottom line is, for going into FY19, we only have $13 million worth of new money.
What page you on?
I'm on page where it says estimated revenue, all this detail.
This says estimated revenue FY 17 to 21.
21, yes.
Local sources is the top line.
Yes. The first page was the assumptions. Where it says local sources, levies for current operations.
Because this is important information because it, like we went off the rails 2.5 years ago, we're about to go off the rails in another 30 months or so.
Right, so if you look at FY19, right now with no tax increase, it looks like the revenue will be $13.8 million more than what we have this year on the bottom line. Then if you, for a total of $496 million of revenue. If you go to the last page of the expenditures, which is the other Excel spreadsheet, we've incorporated some assumptions, a 2% cost of living and step increase for everybody, some utility increases, the cost of bringing some new schools online, and those assumptions are outlined in this document as well. But for FY19, we're projecting a budget just status quo, not making the teacher salaries, a huge increase in teacher salaries. This is just status quo of $497 million. So right out of the gate, status quo, we're short $1 million. Then when you start looking at the increase going into 20, $506 million of revenue, $525 million of expenditures, and that's just status quo as we go through the year.
When you say status quo, are you following the teacher schedule and the COLA schedule?
The teacher's salary, everybody getting a step in COLA and some utility increases.
Okay.
The assumptions are in here as well.
No problem, but I just want to
Yeah.
make sure status quo was including
Yeah,
some of the growth that you know is
exactly.
going to happen.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's bringing on Lucy Beckham in 20, the step in COLA, and just some assumptions are on here. So this was just for information, just for everybody to kind of understand that we've got some decisions to make, and we will incorporate this in a board workshop in February.
Thank you.
So, and just as a quick overview on this, if you put the expenditures and the revenue growth side by side, our expenditures largely led by healthcare costs going up at 4.5% a year, state's retirement costs where you got a defined benefit that they've underfunded for years and they've still got to pay for years. That's growing every year. And then the state telling districts what our teacher pay raises are going to be without sending any dollars for them, are things outside of our control that raise our expenses. Things outside of our control that limit our ability to pay for those expenses are particularly Act 388.
Right.
Over the last 7 years now, the average ability for us to increase taxes has been 2.9%. Let's look at that compared to our expense growth over the next 3 years. Next year, expenses are expected to grow 4.59%. The next year, expenses are expected to grow 5.63%. The next year, and this is 36 months from now, expenses are expected to grow by 6.29%. So we can't even raise taxes to keep up with that. So you heard that 4.5, 6.5, 6.5, 4.5, 5.5, 6.5. We can raise taxes by 2.9%. We cannot tax our way out of this and are headed to insolvency in roughly 30 months unless something changes drastically on our ability to either raise taxes or on our current expense structure.
Right, we either have to find a way to have the state provide more revenue, because it's not like we can eliminate standing out in front of every school, or we're going to have to bring expenses down, because as they are currently, we will outgrow our revenue.
We've got $42 million in reserves right now, which is our our 8% policy level. This year, we're gonna be $500,000 deficit unless we change structure somewhat. Next year, it's projected to grow to $18 million deficit, and the next year, $43 million unless we do. And so we'll be completely out of reserve. Like, you cannot.
Yeah, you can't tax you out of this.
Yeah.
So just, I think what Cindy was trying to say is that the state with its unfunded mandates to us.
Right.
That's what you're really trying to say.
So
Well,
the
it's either the
state
unfunded
has said-
mandates or the formula that doesn't make them pay base student costs, or the formula that says they've got base student costs and we don't even get 50% of that because they think we're a wealthy county.
And-
That something's got to change.
So the richest district in the state is going to be insolvent in 3 years because we cannot, one, they dictate what our expenses are growing at, and then two, they handcuff us with Act 388 with our ability to raise.
And they make us fix their pension problem.
Which is not, I mean, it's not.
That would be number
to bad
three.
mouth the state, this is something that needs to be, community leaders, state leaders need to address.
But I also think too, I don't look at this as they need to help us get this right scenario. I look at it as, is there anything that we're doing
Right, we
that
definitely.
we're spending resources that we normally wouldn't have to spend because of decisions that we've made,
Right.
right? Like, I'll just throw one out there, for example. During bus services, for example, right? We spend an additional millions of dollars to provide transportation to students whose parents exercise school choice options. I'm not saying I'm against school choice, but we're spending millions of dollars so parents can do that. So if other school districts aren't making those kind of decisions, if we've got 7, 8, 9, 10 charter schools, let's say charter school, we have to look at what we're doing. I think before we can go to Columbia and tell legislators, well, you guys got to fix the formula.
Oh, absolutely.
Because we're the richest district, but this is hurting us.
But
when
you're
Go
ahead,
correct,
Kate.
and it's 2.5 million.
I'm next.
Go ahead.
I hear you, and the biggest thing that we're doing that impacts that is our school size, because we have too many schools that are too small, number one. But number two, we need to do both things, because
Yeah.
although we're
Yeah.
the richest district, they tie our hands and we're not allowed, because, on the base student cost is whatever, $2,600, and we're
Okay.
getting 700.
Yeah.
So we have to tackle both.
We do, I think we do. I do, and to your point about the small schools, we just happen to be such a wide and vast district that you have pockets of schools where there's low enrollment, not because people don't want to go, just because there's no growth in those areas as of yet. So is this board going to make a decision? I remember when Todd and I first got on, and the conversation was about closing one of the schools on Edisto. And so we said, well, let's go out to Edisto and see how far it is for the students who live on Edisto Island to have a bus or have them bus into Hollywood. That's 20-something miles. So you're going to put a 4-year-old kid on a bus for 20
Right,
miles?
I'm not saying that's why.
Right, but I'm saying, but those are decisions, those are just our realities that we deal with. Those aren't situations that we created. Those are issues because we want to educate kids in their area so we don't put babies on the bus for 20, 30, 40 minutes one way.
Yeah, but I
That's
think
not something that we
schools
did
are-
ourselves,
And
right.
I think we've agreed not to do that where those pockets are
Yeah.
right now, but I think where we have schools that are 5 minutes apart and we have 250 kids here and 250 kids here, that's not, from an education standpoint, it's not best, and from
Yeah.
a financial standpoint, it's not best. But we need to do both things.
So, and I think, I had a conversation with some of the folks that are going to Columbia tomorrow, and one of the things that we were talking about this morning is just what you said, Michael. Just about every decision that is made is with the number of people we affect, somebody is not going to be positively affected by that. We have an obligation to remove the emotion and talk about it in reality. Nobody wants to put 4-year-olds on a bus and send babies down the road. However, operating this school costs this much number of dollars, and we have to have a real conversation that says, this is money we got to raise your taxes to pay for here. So we've got to start having those tough conversations. I hate to say it, but Kate's kind of talking about North Charleston. I can walk from, I ain't even a skinny person, I can walk from my house and hit 5 elementary schools.
Yeah.
So we might have to have those and remember, we came very close to having 2 high schools 2.5 miles apart in North Charleston 2 months ago. So we have to bring our piece to the table, but we have to acknowledge that locally, there's not enough money on the table that we could fix this. We've got to do some of our business, but we've got to ask for some of the other stuff. And to that, I would like the Audit and Finance Committee to get us a handle on the governmental agencies that have made fee in lieu or deals on industries that are in our county that are not paying taxes because of some incentive. I mean, I recently found out that Charleston County has done an incentive for the Firefly Distillery that's going to locate in North Charleston that's a fee in lieu. And we weren't even, it was the last sentence on.
Wasn't Boeing on that too?
Huh?
I thought I heard that.
That was literally the last sentence in a newspaper article about a week ago. Anybody on this board heard that there was an industry coming to North Charleston that we're not getting tax money for, or are we? So I would like to see if the Audit and Finance Committee can spend some time telling us what are those things we're up against? What tips are out there? What fee and lieu's have been made? Even on the smaller businesses, we think Boeing, but what about the other businesses? To see where we really are not getting money from certain agencies or from certain industries, and that has to be a tough conversation. You're not allowing us to collect taxes. Let's have that conversation because we need money to operate our district.
But, go ahead. Okay.
Just quick question. On the Act 388 issues, could we work with other counties, you know, Beaufort and whoever else, that are in the same boat as we are, that are limited because of the silly laws that are in place?
Yes, and Glenn had suggested other, like in Orangeburg County, where he had worked temporarily as well, that they've got, you know, I want to say it was a shrinking tax base, that they face the same issue, that they cannot tax their way out of it, so some of the smaller counties who are beneficiaries are still handcuffed by it
And
because they can't.
it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough.
Right, but it has to start being a real conversation that doesn't have those explosive emotional words like Kate just said ridiculous. We all know, but it is what it is.
But just to give you a heads up
conversation.
This is us going off the rails in 30 months with no ability to tax our way out of it, unless we make changes on our end and also advocate for changes in the state house.
And I'd like to thank the Audit and Finance Committee for bringing this so we can start having this
Well, this is-
conversation.
yeah,
Thank you,
Ms.
Kelly.
Myers for bringing it.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Ms.
thank you.
Myers. All right, thanks,
And with that, we'll call the Audit and Finance Committee to adjournment.